Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many people here in person, and it's also wonderful to welcome our colleagues online, wherever you may be. The Athena Lecture was established by the college in 2001 to celebrate the achievements of women in science, engineering, technology, medicine, and business. And each year, we invite a distinguished lecturer with a background in these areas to talk on her career, both current activities as well as her career pathway. The lecture forms part of Imperial's commitment to promote gender equality in STEM at all academic levels. Our speaker for this year's lecture is Grazia Vittadini. Welcome, Grazia. She's the Chief Technology Officer at Rolls-Royce, but she also has many other irons in the fire too. She's a member of the Siemens Supervisory Board, the Senate of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, an advisor at the German Center for Mobility of the Future, as well as at the Department of Aerospace Science and Technology of Politecnico di Milano, where I believe you received your degree. She also has an honorary degree, Doctor of Science, from our colleagues at Cranfield University, the only university in the UK that has its own airfield. We're quite jealous, really.
We can work on that.
Excellent. Prior to joining Rolls-Royce in 2021, Grazia spent almost 20 years at Airbus, covering a broad range of operations from commercial aircraft, defense and space to technology and innovation across the company. And she was the first woman to be appointed to the Airbus Executive Committee as the CTO. She's always led transnational and diverse teams, and she's maintained forward-looking and very interdisciplinary approach to her career, promoting innovation through fields as far distant as, at least from aerospace, as AI and quantum computing. Indeed, that's where Grazia and I first met, was at a quantum computing conference in Munich a number of years ago. Airbus was then holding a quantum computing challenge, and I hope Rolls-Royce will be holding one soon. So, Grazia, very, very warm welcome to Imperial College. We're delighted that you agreed to do this lecture for us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the very kind introduction, Ian. Dear students, dear members of faculty, distinguished guests, I'm very, very honored to be invited here today, and admittedly also a bit humbled, because you here are in the habit of being taught by and working with the very best researchers. So any lecturer here has quite big shoes to fill. And if it weren't enough, well, the lecture is named after Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, so no pressure at all. Keep calm, carry on, smile. Well, Athena is not only the goddess of wisdom, she's also known for her sharpness of mind and strategic approach, and is also quite defiant. She even challenges Zeus in person, the king of gods. And that's why she very quickly became my very personal favorite goddess when I was studying Greek mythology at school. In short, Athena inspires us to venture, to question, to constantly seek new challenges. And her spirit of seeking challenges will certainly resonate with you here at Imperial College, because your mission is to strive for excellency and to create a true benefit for society. This spirit also resonates with the global aviation community, because we are an industry born out of an impossible dream, reaching for the sky. We connect people, we connect markets, all across the globe, making the planet a smaller place and faster than any other means of transport in human history. And this spirit also resonates a lot with me personally. For instance, when I jotted down my notes and put some order into my thoughts preparing for this lecture. So in the next half an hour or so, if you allow me, I will talk about how taking on new challenges has guided my journey in aerospace, leading me to very diverse experiences, which really did make me grow. I will also speak about the huge, daunting challenge aviation and the aerospace industry as a whole is facing. And of course, I will tell you why the solutions to this challenge are all propelled by diversity. So let's jump right in. Well, since I took my very first steps, I think it's fair to say the world has changed quite a bit. I recently read about the first mobile phone call, which took place when I was happily in kindergarten. 50 years anniversary this year, if I'm not mistaken. And today we've passed from this bulky, hefty mobile phones to smartphones, offering incredible functions and capabilities. In the same period, a return flight between New York and London went from costing almost 4,000 pounds to 400 if you're lucky. So a lot of technologies that used to be an expensive luxury for happy few became available to many, improving our everyday lives, and that's the power of progress. We've also made considerable progress regarding diversity and inclusion. I mean, look at this picture. A couple of weeks ago, Royal Aeronautical Society dinner shows quite a bit of that progress, right? There in the middle, Carissa Khan, engineer, future air mobility thought leader, a pilot, and the very recently elected new president of the Royal Aeronautical Society. Yeah, and I'm often asked, well, was it an event for women? No, it wasn't. Was it only women? No, it wasn't. We were, in fact, quite a minority, but all compact, standing behind our president as fellows of the Royal Aeronautical Society. Well, indeed, it's not just there. It's fair to say that in STEM, we continue being a bit of an exception rather than a rule, and still facing challenges. According to the United Nations, we're even a staggering 300 years away from achieving full gender equality if we continue at today's pace. So yes, we've come a long way. Don't get me wrong, but we still have a very long road ahead of us. Now, back then, when kindergarten, right, when that first mobile call was made, I was already head over heels in love, literally, with aviation. And nobody really knows where that came from. Allegedly, if I believe what my mother says, my third word in Italian, I'm Italian, after mamma, mother, papa, that's both dad and food. My third word was aeroplano, that's airplane. So, yes, that was me as a child. And as a teenager, that evolved to building your own models and spending time in museums, which I still love doing, spending hours admiring iconic and timeless aircraft like Jason. That's me right here, not far from here at the London Science Museum. So visiting one of my all-time favorites, that's a de Havilland Gypsy Moth, the one who took legendary aviatrix Amy Johnson from London all the way to Melbourne. So Yeah, when leaving school, I applied to the Italian Air Force. I wanted to be a jet fighter pilot. Little detail, back then, women were not allowed to become fighter pilots in Italy. I applied nonetheless, and guess what? I got a rejection letter explaining that I could not be considered. What a crazy idea. So I was forced to pivot to something different. I drafted my own personal vendetta. You don't let me fly your aircraft? Well, I'm going to go and build them. So aeronautical engineering it was, with a focus on aerodynamics at the Politecnico in Milan. Now, the setting there was a bit different from what I see in this auditorium. 99% of my fellow student mates were men. I completed my studies. I started working on the Italian side of the Eurofighter consortium. And then, yes, I realized if I wanted to grow, I was the only woman in that company, and I was not allowed to go through the shop floor because I would distract colleagues working on the shop floor. So probably it was well meant to protect me from whatever kind of increases harassment, but you fix the wrong side of the equation, right? Pretty typical phenomenon. So I figured, okay, if I want to grow, I want to change the world, but maybe there's better places to start from. And so I signed up to go to Paris, working as an engineer on the airframe of, at that time, the new Falcon. Well, 2 weeks before moving to Paris, the company I had signed up for, an engineering company, told me, oh, Grazia, we're so sorry. We didn't get the contract at the end, so it won't be Paris. How about Monaco? Now, Monaco in Italian can be two very different places. One is on the Côte d'Azur, the other is in Bavaria, Munich, and Munich it was. So had quite some prejudice. I couldn't speak a word of German, but I said, Grazia, go. You have to survive at least 3 months. And if it doesn't work, you can always come back, right? So that was 2000. I never got back. So huge change. But again, what that story taught me is that leaving your comfort zone and accepting new challenges, what also gives you the opportunity really to learn and to grow and develop. So refusing to let an unjust rejection kill my dream of aviation, walking into an auditorium where I was more or less the only woman, accepting a job in an unforeseen country whose language I didn't speak. You know, in this way, taking on challenges, which scared me at the beginning, became a sort of leitmotif for all my career journey decisions and milestones. So a couple of years later, the company I was working for unfortunately went bankrupt, so I sent my CV all over the place, and Airbus answered. Airbus in Hamburg, it was the times of the design phase of the A380. And yes, I did change a couple of positions in my 20 years at Airbus. This is only a very limited collection of badges which accompanied me throughout the years. Basically, these are the ones they forgot to retire, so the ones I kept, right? So there were certainly many, many more. I started in Hamburg, and that was the first badge. It was still Daimler Chrysler Aerospace, subtitle Airbus, so it was still Germany, France, with UK and Spanish participations. But that's where I started on the A380. Then spent several years in Toulouse, in the south of France, before being back to Munich, where it all started in 2000. working with teams pretty much all over the globe, not only Europe, from design to structural testing to flight testing to little detour 3 years as head of internal audit and forensic compliance investigations. As an engineer, that was exactly my reaction when HR asked me, how about this great career opportunity? You crazy, me? I know these guys, because I had been audited several times in the past, and forget it. No value added brought to the company, and then you start thinking, oh gosh, if you know what doesn't work, it means you can change it for the better, right? So another kind of trap I keep on falling into up to today. So that was an interesting parenthesis. I passed many domains, not only in the civil aviation division, but also within Airbus defense and space, where the challenge was bringing engineering together out of separate siloed divisions. So what's the common denominator between a rocket, a satellite, a jet fighter, a transport military aircraft, antennas, encryption software? That was not an easy one, but also very, very rewarding experience. And after 20 years as an airframer, I finally went to the very heart of aviation, the power and propulsion of an airplane, personified by Rolls-Royce. And on this slide, you see a more recent selfie with some of my amazing colleagues at Rolls-Royce. Now, career advisors will seldom tell you that it's good to go zigzag. Many HR professionals I had the privilege of interacting with, often were claiming, Grazia, you need to have a plan and stick to that plan. And if you change too much, it will be seen as a symptom, that you don't really know where your destiny will bring you. You don't know what you want. And I kind of had a plan, but then I always had opportunities presenting themselves, opening doors on parallel universes I didn't even know existed. And yes, following that line of thought, maybe I can change things for the better, serving a purpose which is bigger than just my own career. That's something which brought me to where I am today. So every step of the way, every new experience, different fields, different teams made me grow as a person. And also the diversity of experiences. The experience of diversity itself gave me, I think, the tool set you need to tackle very different challenges and very different positions. So especially in an industry like ours, where safety is of paramount importance, safety comes first. It's non-negotiable, always. You need diversity of thought to get to solutions which are robust, stress-tested from different perspectives. You cannot all think the same way when it comes to safety. So definitely diversity is not a nice to have. It's a key strength in every mind, in every team of individuals. For quite some time, though, I thought that a high appreciation of diversity would be a given in today's modern business world. And apart from that rejection at the beginning of my journey by the Italian Air Force, I never had the feeling, okay, here I'm being discriminated, I don't have the opportunities others do. The fact is, as I started taking more and more responsibilities, I was in my first executive role, I started becoming more visible. I had several women from the company, but also outside the company, coming to me, sharing their horror stories, which utterly shocked me at times. being asked about family plans during job interviews is illegal. Not only unethical, illegal. Being asked to wear makeup in the workplace because the customers are coming, you need to be pretty. Being asked to lower your voice down, by 1 octave, because if it's too high, it doesn't come across as very assertive. Being asked not to be too colorful in the way you dress. This is all absolutely unacceptable. Colleagues from manufacturing units coming, showing me the clothes they had to wear. Men's clothes in size S. Doesn't work. Okay, it's not acceptable. And this is what made me understand, okay, the world hasn't quite changed as much as I had hoped and believed. Maybe I've been lucky. Maybe my personality is the way it is, and I'm not subject to these kind of behaviors, but nobody should. Nobody should. So I realized that I'm not just another executive, but a woman executive. And as a woman, whatever you are, you will face specific challenges. And, thinking back, I had something I didn't give much importance to at the beginning, but my very first leadership role ever, a role you come to without having anything in your pocket to demonstrate that you will make it. You've never had it before, okay? So there are some risks in this. I remember my boss kept on introducing me as our gorgeous new chief engineer. Do it once, do it twice, 3 times. And he was convinced he was being nice, right? So with courage, I still do not know today. I don't know where I took it from, but I invited him in my office and had to tell him, please, this, it doesn't fit. It's not what I'm here for. Could you please avoid doing that? And he was very surprised, but certainly would have never introduced a man chief engineer as our gorgeous new colleague. So I had to explain him that what was relevant to know about me as the new person in this position were my qualification, my experience. Why am I sharing this today? Because I'm sure it's not just an isolated experience, and you should always assume positive intentions, okay? A lot of it comes from the fact that we're just not used yet to having parity at all levels, right? So there's some odd behavior sometimes popping up. So you need to know what the legal limit is, and you're also entitled to have your own ideas and perceptions, and you should by all means be ready to address these needs. So in my position, I continue feeling that responsibility today to address the challenge, and also with the intent to really keep doors open for others to follow. It's no point being the first anything if there's no one behind you. So I keep spreading the word that diversity is not just a matter of ethics. It's a very rational business choice, right? So why should you disregard 50% of the world's population? And just as diversity of experience made me grow as a person, it's really, there's data, an abundance of data demonstrating that it's a key success factor for businesses worldwide. Now, second part of my lecture, why does diversity propel the aerospace industry to new horizons? Now, our industry and more globally, our society are facing unprecedented challenges. Climate change. The climate time bomb is ticking, said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently. So to limit global warming to that 1.5 degrees centigrade, the emissions of aviation need to start decreasing now and will need to go down by half already by 2030. This will be no small feat, considering that between 2010 and 2019, global greenhouse gas emissions were at their highest level in human history. And for the aviation industry in particular, the bar keeps on being raised. Some 15 years from now, we expect that about 8 to 9 billion people will fly every single year. So the aviation's contribution to global warming could even increase instead of decreasing, well beyond today 3.5%. So inaction is not an option. If our industry doesn't become part of the solution, we might soon run out of business. So 184 member states of the International Civil Aviation Organization share the ambition of reaching net zero by 2050. Some 95% of all states ratified the Paris Agreement, promising to limit global warming to maximum 2 degrees centigrades. And all these governments, legislators are keeping a very wary eye on development of our industry. So how? How do we decarbonize aviation? Well, not that simple. And there is not, perhaps yet, one single path to net zero aviation. But there is a very clear focus, and that's what brought me from an airframer to an engine manufacturer. The clear focus is propulsion. If you're serious about sustainability, that's where you have to roll up your sleeves and start finding solutions. If we want to really decarbonize aviation, we need to decarbonize propulsion. Meaning we need to drive innovation for more and more efficient gas turbines, for sustainable aviation fuels, and beyond that, to develop third-generation technologies. So innovation, absolutely, is driven by a diversity of aspects, diversity of teams. Let's take a look at the work cut out for them. First, as I mentioned, we need to increase the efficiency of our gas turbines. This is vital. And, well, increasing efficiency may sound like nothing exciting. It's just small steps. Is that enough? Well, look back at aviation history for a minute. And, since the first commercial jet aircraft took off in the 1950s, CO2 emissions per passenger per kilometer were reduced by 80%. And over the past 30 years, CO2 emissions more than halved. So even with this sizable achievement, there still is significant room for improvement. At Rolls-Royce, we produce the world's most efficient, large, wide-body aero engine, the Trent XWB, powering the Airbus A350. It's the engine you can see on the slide. It has a 15% fuel consumption advantage over the first generation of Trent engines. It's a considerable potential, and we're ready to even go beyond this. We have recently taken to test our UltraFan demonstrator in Derby, which would offer another 10% fuel saving compared to current engines. And the lever of efficiency is a lever you can pull virtually immediately, and timing is absolutely of the essence when it comes to decarbonization. And why are more efficient gas turbines so important? Because they pave the way for the introduction of alternative fuels, be it bio-based sustainable aviation fuels, synthetic SAF, be it perhaps one day liquid hydrogen, whatever it is that we will be combusting. I think it's fair to state that at the beginning especially, there will not be much of it and it will be very expensive. So every single drop counts. And the less you combust, the less you emit. So it's pretty straightforward. To achieve further progress in efficiency and to continue pushing the boundaries of what is possible, we need indeed within our teams increasingly diverse skills. It's not just the gas turbine specialists. It's more and more computing, modeling, it's atmospheric science. It's end-to-end becoming more and more fundamentally important. You know, when I started my career, aviation was pretty much a nuts and bolts kind of business. Data didn't play that much of a role. Windows 2000 had just come out, and it ran on a working memory of 64 megabytes, if I remember well. That's 6 times the size of a presentation like the one I'm flicking through. So aviation today is one of the most data-rich industries, and digital technologies are a fundamental part of our work. Every engine, our own industrial system have a very strong digital backbone. And from one generation to the next, we may need something like 6 times the computing power from one development phase to the next. So it's a very, very steep curve. And of course, we also need diverse teams to bring in the different capabilities and skill sets we need to maximize the potential of engineering and computing. And this is just one example of how diversity drives efficiency and sustainability in our industry. Now, another pillar I mentioned are sustainable fuels, alternative fuels. That's another field where we need to innovate to decarbonize propulsion and with it aviation. Now, sustainable aviation fuels hold quite a significant potential. If we switch to 100% sustainable aviation fuel, we can reduce the in-flight CO2 emissions, which some say could go up to 80% savings, if, of course, with certain conditions to be fulfilled. Sustainable aviation fuel, depending which certification standard you pursue, can be compatible with existing engine technology, existing airport infrastructure. So why haven't we switched to sustainable aviation fuels yet, you may ask? Well, there's a couple of obstacles on the way. First of all, certification. So current airplanes, engines, and airframes can fly with a blend of up to 50% sustainable aviation fuel, right? You can just mix it in the tanks, no further work needed. So we have already proven with several different combination of engine and airframe that we can fly safely up to 100% SAF in our tanks. Together with Virgin Atlantic, we are about to undertake yet another demonstration flight. So the first net zero transatlantic flight later this year. It's a Boeing 787 powered by the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000, and which you can see hanging under the wing of the 747 there. This is our flight test bed. And Imperial will also be on board this transatlantic flight, which will be super interesting because it's extended time at very high altitude. So it will allow also to really stress test the functioning of the fuel system on, and specifically looking at the viscosity of the SAFs we will be using. And we will be gathering also data on the non-CO2 effects of flying with SAF. So it's going to be a really interesting one to watch. However, let's say it all works well. Let's say we certify our engines and airplanes to fly with 100% SAF. There still is a second pitfall, and that is producing the amount of SAF you need to replace fully conventional kerosene. Last year, SAF production increased of 200%. Sounds huge, right? Well, this increase brought to a total amount of 300 million liters. Now multiply that by 1,000, and you still fall short of what we would need by 2050 to power 100% aviation by 2050. And I mentioned this, that 80% CO2 reduction kind of ambition. Third catch, SAF can be sustainable only if it's produced sustainably. Specifically, if we look at synthetic kind of fuels, the CO2 that we use to produce it needs to be extracted from the environment, typically from the atmosphere, so direct air carbon capture. Meaning we need that kind of system at scale, at industrial scale. And there's very interesting demonstrators out there. One we are building at Rolls-Royce in Derby to demonstrate the technology on behalf of HMG. But again, the scale, the ramp up, the industrialization of these demonstrators is not yet on the horizon at all. So on top of that, we will need a huge amount of low carbon, affordable, reliable energy. We can contribute to overcoming these pitfalls as industry. Beyond the DAC demonstrators, we're working on small modular reactors, which could be a significant part of the solution. Yet the challenge is so daunting that no company alone, no industry alone, no nation alone will get to an answer. So taking SAF to the skies will work successfully only if a large diversity of players join forces: universities, research institutes, regulatory bodies, energy companies, big oil companies, engine manufacturers, airframers, of course, airports and airlines. And this is just a few, a selection. So the aviation transformation will be complex, and it doesn't get any easier if we look into third generation technologies, the last field of action I mentioned initially. These technologies truly have the potential to cut CO2 emissions, in-flight emissions, to zero. Overall, we can kind of split them in two macro categories, so hydrogen and hybrid electric propulsion. So if we start with hydrogen, hydrogen holds a fantastic promise. It has 3 times the energy density of kerosene, 4 times the volume, unfortunately. So you either pressurize it or you liquefy it. Both not easy solutions to build tanks, which then need to be integrated on an aircraft. But in terms of emissions, if you combust it, you will mainly have water and some NOx. but certainly less than combusting fuel, kerosene or synthetic fuel. So to tap into this potential and see if the promise can be fulfilled, we need to master several tech challenges. Again, requiring very close collaboration between specialists in various sectors and diverse partnerships. Hydrogen burns faster, burns hotter than kerosene, so we need to adapt our gas turbines, redesigning the combustor, the injectors, considering materials to withstand the significantly higher temperatures. And this is something we are working on at pace. We will develop key technologies and an integrated power plant architecture for a liquid hydrogen gas turbine, including also electrical systems and fuel distribution for optimum hydrogen storage. Now, last November, we conducted the world's first run of a modern aero engine on hydrogen. And you can see the test setting on the slide here. The changes, though, are not all encompassed at the turbine. You need to rethink the whole aircraft structure, right? If you want to integrate hydrogen tanks, be it pressurized or liquefied hydrogen. So if you take the pressurized route, you're going to have to cope with 700 bars, more or less. If you take the liquefied route, we're talking about cryogenic kind of conditions, minus 253 degrees Celsius for hydrogen to stay liquid. So still a lot of work and research ahead of us, and this challenge is very, very real. Now, also in the field of hybrid electric and electric propulsion, we have the potential to cut CO2 emissions to zero. And the main tech challenge here is that if you want to transport something else than batteries, you're limited, right? So the limiting factor is definitely the weight, the energy density of batteries. This is why, especially hybrid electric propulsion can be a solution for very, very short haul, especially suited for connecting small islands. And it shouldn't come, therefore, as a surprise that in this domain we're working with companies from Scandinavia and Japan. So with airframer Tecnam and Scandinavia's largest regional airline, Vittadini, we're developing an all-electric small commuter aircraft. We are reaching out not only across geographical boundaries, but also across industries. We're working on a fuel cell electric demonstrator together with a Hyundai Motor Group. And this picture, I think that was Farnborough last year, the signing of our partnership. Now, this kind of cooperations are essential to promote cross-sectoral expertise in engineering on a small as well as on a large scale. You know, during my studies at university, I remember working on a project where I used my knowledge from aviation engineering, from aerospace materials, to optimize the design of my ballet shoes. I can imagine the face of my structures professor when I came with the idea of applying composite material to improve the endurance of my point shoes. Well, by the same token, aviation benefits from expertise and experience, automotive accumulated, for instance, in the field of e-mobilities and battery integration and combining our capabilities and knowledge can help us master tech challenges more quickly. And for both hydrogen and especially hybrid electric, there's still quite a few of these challenges needing resolution. And again, in addition, you need to always consider the bigger picture, right? To take off with hydrogen and take off with electricity, we will also need a new infrastructure on the ground, be it for refueling or for recharging, and a massive, massive upscale of green hydrogen and clean energy production. So preparations to take off into cleaner skies are underway. However, to achieve that net zero aviation ambition, we must drive innovation, maximizing the full potential offered by more and more efficient gas turbines, sustainable aviation fuels, and third generation technologies. Now, technologies like these help make our world a better place, enabling us to connect, to exchange, and to decarbonize. But technologies also make our world more complex. And so to reap their full benefit and to master the challenge, we must tackle this complexity. How do we do this? Well, from my point of view, we are lost if we venture in this complexity on our own. But if we do approach the world as team players and engage with large diversity of actors, with their experience, their skills, their knowledge, we can navigate this growing complexity. And by the way, the ancient Greeks were seemingly already aware of this. Instead of worshipping only one Athena or only Zeus, they did recognize the importance of having all the gods, each with their specific talents, on their side to succeed into their endeavors. For what use is your wisdom if you also need the right winds to take flight? And admittedly, diversity can be challenging. And if you just look shortly into the gods' Olympus, well, it's quite telling. Constantly, when you have diverse teams, you will have, points of views, opinions being constantly challenged, constantly questioned, considering thoughts, ideas of others, even when you think you've gotten to a conclusion, then, well, you have to reopen the scope. You need to merge all this into the possible best solution. Is anything but a day at the pool. But the benefits are absolutely worth the effort. For each of us personally, as an experience that make us grow, and for us collectively as businesses, as societies, as a cornerstone of success. So I would really like to challenge you to embrace diversity, embrace your Athena spirit, because it's going to be you, the next generation, being absolutely instrumental in shaping and nurturing a more diverse world into which everyone can really thrive. And I am more than confident that you will succeed in doing so. Thank you.
Wow. We're going. I think if I stand too close, there's a feedback. I know it's just some choreography. Okay, we've got some time for questions. Haley.
First of all, thank you so much for that talk. As a woman of colour who studied aerospace at Imperial, a lot of what you said resonated with me, so thank you for sharing your experience. So my question is, a lot of the time I hear that women really often undersell themselves in for example, interviews in terms of their expertise and their part in certain projects, for example. So how do we account for that when recruiting to make sure that we're really getting the best people for the roles?
That is a very good question.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, of course.
So there's the women underselling themselves versus other categories overselling themselves. And where do you find the balance?
The right average. It kind of, I mentioned it, the fixing the wrong side of the equation. Normally, this kind of observation, substantiated by facts, is worked upon by creating great mentoring programs for women and teaching women to be more assertive and more self-confident. And I spoke about, when I created that engineering function out of different siloed division in a previous company. At some point, I was under pressure. I needed to publish the org chart of my new team without having the names yet, right? So basically, I published the architecture. This is how the engineering function is going to look like, with boxes and titles, one of which was engineering performance. My mailbox was inundated by colleagues saying, "Oh, I've seen your org chart. I am interested. This could be me. You'd be so lucky to have me because I'm the best person you could aim for, to work in this team," including engineering operations, which was basically thought to be like, chief of staff, performance management, etc. So a junior role. I had like senior vice president, executive vice president, writing, "Oh, this is me, engineering performance." Nobody thought about asking, what's behind this box? What's the title? What's beyond the title? What's a job description? Not one woman wrote. Now, would I have wanted women to come and say, "Give me a box," without knowing what's inside? No way. No way, right? So I think a bit differently in the sense that I believe everybody should be underselling themselves or being modest rather than boisterous, because you never know. And there's always margin to improve and to learn, right? So just come and take whatever it is that you're taking to the table. You don't need to play anything you are not. So, and I look for authenticity. I don't look for marketing specialists.
It's hilarious. I had an almost identical conversation with someone this morning, and my advice was that I would like people to be honest. And if you're genuinely honest about yourself, you don't undersell yourself and you don't oversell yourself. But it's very hard. Yeah, question at the back. Oh, you said the B word. Not the B word we used to.
Surely that's a dead end. Should be going for biomass, short haul electric, medium haul. The best solution is high speed rail. Why would we need to fly to Paris?
Okay.
There's so many flights are unnecessary. We have low cost rail lines like airlines like Ryanair. You have the low cost. It's much cheaper to electrify the world's railways, run high speed trains, cut out a lot of flying altogether. It's not just the CO2 emissions from the aircraft, it's getting to and from it.
Okay, we've got that. I'm gonna just re-ask that question because people online probably haven't heard it because we didn't get the mic to you. So it's about the balance between biomass, hydrogen, some safety concerns around hydrogen and how people respond to that, and then I guess the tension between flying and a broader transport ecosystem, electrifying, using rail transport, the journeys to the airport, I guess the whole system, and I guess the question really is, where do you see the flight piece and the different modes of flying versus the broader transport network?
Well, listen, first of all, biomass. Biomass as feedstock to produce sustainable aviation fuel is by design limited, okay? A bit less perhaps in the United States, where there's so much agriculture, so much waste coming from the process, ligneous waste. In Europe and certainly in the UK, there's not enough to cover the needs of long-range aviation. So it will need to be synthetic. And by the way, when we look at bio, sustainable aviation fuel, whatever crop it is that we grow, we cannot be competing with the food chain. We don't want to be using drinkable water to grow anything, right? So in Europe, it will rather be the synthetic kind of the route, right, to develop alternative fuels. Meaning basically combining CO2, ideally taken out of the environment, with green hydrogen. You're going to need green hydrogen anyhow. Many industries will be needing green hydrogen, not only aviation. It could be shipping, trucking, steel, cement, you name it. Sustainable aviation fuel, the A stand for aviation, will always be a niche in the perspective of big oil companies, right? Whereas hydrogen has the potential of upscaling, becoming cheaper, faster, because different industry will require it. Now, in terms of safety, many people immediately think the Hindenburg. Oh my gosh, not safe. Which is paradoxical because there were, unfortunately, worse accidents in the early years of airships. There were worse accidents, just the press was not there. The Hindenburg was the first event where someone took pictures of all phases of the disaster. Now, please rest assured, we no longer intend putting hydrogen in cotton tanks. Technology has evolved. There's dual layer kind of system as in use in rocketry, for instance. So is it easy? No, it's not. Is it solved? By no means. What I can guarantee is that no corner will be cut. Safety comes first always. So there will be certainly a very challenging and long process to validate that technology. Should we be one day in the position to certify that technology, the tanks, their integration, the engines, consider the whole infrastructure question. Should we be in a position to do that? Why should we continue wrapping carbon around hydrogen molecules to create SAF? Right? So it's different time horizons. It's not competing technologies. The first, most immediate solution is definitely sustainable fuel. There's just not enough out there. There is not enough to, again, fuel aviation on a net zero horizon up to 2050. So it's too soon, unfortunately, to say we bet all our money on one pathway and the rest we disregard. And your point around, do we really need to fly on short routes? That's a personal choice each one of us has to make. You know, the other week I went to the International Transport Forum Ministerial Conference. I was in Munich. The conference was in Leipzig. Train, absolutely. Why not?
And of course, France has just issued a new legislation
Yes.
around short haul flights.
Yes.
Okay. Claire. Could you use the mic? Yes.
Thank you for a fascinating talk, Grazia. I really enjoyed both parts. I was wondering if you could reflect on the role that mentors have played in the development of your career.
Really? I never had one. I never had one. Neither mentors nor sponsors. I have been mentor to many. Mm-hmm.
Maybe let's reframe it then. What would have been useful or helpful? So if somebody came to you now and said, would you mentor me? What would you take that to mean, and how would you mentor a junior or sponsor an earlier career person?
I'm a bit critical when it comes to sponsors, because it may be great having someone in certain positions with a certain power sticking their neck out for you, clearing the way for you. But should they one day fall in disgrace, you're going to fall too, regardless what you've done or not done. It's highly likely, right? So I always have the feeling you don't quite control what's happening to you. So it's not something I normally look to favorably. Now, what I do when I mentor, right, is exactly to think, okay, what would have I wanted to know? Now, in my 20 years at Airbus, I went from being a subcontractor to the first woman ever on the board on the executive committee of Airbus. That's pretty fast. Every job I changed basically was one step more. I have a lot of scars, and I had broken bones, bruises, if you get what I mean, right? So there's some non-written things when it comes to leadership, when you start reaching certain levels, how to play corporate dynamics.
Do you think you've got more or different scars and bruises than you would have had if you were a man going through that route?
I think I have more, yes. Also because, let's not forget, Airbus is predominantly Franco-German with UK and Spanish participation, Italian. It is still a quite political environment where there's a lot of attention at having a certain percentage per passport growing through the ranks. An Italian, basically, I never got the shiny jobs. You get the jobs nobody wants because they're tough, because it's mission impossible, or tough suppliers, or a transformation to be pulled through. Yeah. So.
With hindsight, and are you glad you had the tough jobs and not the shiny jobs?
Oh, yes, of course. Because you always take the job, of course, thinking this will be a train crash. This will be a spectacular failure because I've never done this before, And then you see every time that just by sticking to your basic core value, and it's no rocket science, right? So the idea that you are serving a company, a purpose, you're not there for your own whatever fulfillment. The fact that you have a taste for doing things excellently. The fact that integrity, and I'm not just talking about ethical, also intellectual integrity, is just something you never compromise. At the end, for me, that's what it was. Every single time. The scale was bigger, but it was always me. And you need to go through that phase of extreme doubt and fear, and then you see, it works.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last quick question. I'm going to give it to Reshma Steva.
Thanks, that was a really brilliant talk. So clearly there's a lot in the innovation space that needs to happen for sustainable aviation. My question was more about the piece on reskilling. So there's a huge workforce that needs to be reskilled with these new technologies. And how do you as a leader see the role of industry or perhaps even universities, and how do we kind of make that transition in the most kind of fair and equal way possible?
Well, it's absolutely also here critically important that there's seamless collaborations between universities and industry to continuously exchange on. Nobody has a crystal ball, right? So there's things we know, things we assume, and we need to have that conversation together in order to be able to anticipate a need before it materializes, because then it's too late, right? So it's absolutely a fundamental piece of the puzzle, and one which, for instance, brought us to create an academy of nuclear skills close to Rolls-Royce in Derby, because we were seeing we're not getting, so these profiles do not exist. So can we train our apprentices? Can we convert material engineers to apply their science to a different field? So there will be more of that, certainly. I see, well, cyber will definitely be another area where we're going to have to do something in that sense.
And are you doing, as you're bringing those new programs, what is the diversity looking like? Because there's a skills gap, and then there's a diversity in that skills gap, right? So what are you doing something proactive to deliver that? And how is that tension between we just need the numbers now, so whoever, versus trying to curate the groupings?
That's a proof of the pudding, right? Because we can all make bold commitments, but then it's when the going gets tough that you really see if your model works and if you stick to your commitments. What I see is that indeed, and it's fascinating because if you look at environmental activists, name a young man. I have only young women in mind, and you see also in young apprentices really that will not only to talk about the problem but to act and to solve it. And there's no better way to solve problems than to be an engineer. So I think we're getting there.
Okay. I am going to let Stephen have one last question, since it's going to be his last Athena lecture as Associate Provost. So it only seems fair that you get the last question, Stephen.
Okay, so which is the harder problem, achieving gender equality in STEM or zero carbon aviation?
Oh, you didn't let me down.
Well, if we continue as we do today, gender equality is going to take 300 years. For decarbonization, we have only until 2050. So certainly, I think gender may be even more difficult. It's the first time I've been asked this question. It's really intriguing.
Well, on that depressing note. But you did talk about dreaming the impossible, right? So I think maybe this is a challenge that we can take up, and have actively been taken up. So I'm just going to, just a couple of thanks. Well, first of all, to Grazia for an amazing and inspiring talk, and for being so open, honest, and indeed authentic. As you described, it's been a real pleasure. I'd like to thank the EDIC team who've organised this and been running, and Rob is here also taking notes. Thank you in particular, Stephen's team. It is your last Athena Lecture as Associate Provost. You've done an amazing job. So thank you on behalf of everyone in the college. So weird. I'm too close to you, Grazia, yeah. Are we okay? I can move now? Okay. We're getting some choreography at the back. I mean, it's like, we're expecting a disco ending, but I think we're trying very hard at Imperial to create a more inclusive environment and to balance our strive for excellence and impact, looking at these diverse teams and recognizing the business case you talked about. It never ceases to amaze me that as evidence-based organizations like we're in, don't just go, well, all the evidence is there and clear. We need to create this diverse space because that's the way we all do better. So I think we're moving in the right direction. There are challenges, but events like this, inspirational talks, help us some way along that way. This is not the end of the afternoon. Unfortunately, if you're online, it is. So thank you for joining. If you're here, please join us for a small reception and some afternoon tea. And we're looking forward to seeing lots more of Grazia in her role. Of course, Rolls-Royce is a key partner for the college. We had a few discussions earlier about how we might take that forward. So if you get a chance to catch her now, you will hopefully see her about campus more. Sure. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I should have said tea is outside and then downstairs. And hopefully cakes. Okay.